Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed, Daf 30 of Masechta Yoima. Daf Lamed Shtickle, it goes in interesting places. The first, Amud or so, or 3/4 of an Amud is very serious bathroom sugyas. Remember the third parak of Masechta Brachos? So it's like that, but I think a shtickle more intense. And then we get to a new mikvah a new mishnah where we talk about going to the mikvah before doing the avoda or before going into the azar in the Beis Hamikdash, and that kind of would be sort of the theme of Lamed Amud Beis. Let us get started. We're on Daf Chavtes Amud Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. So this was the rule in the Beis Hamikdash, that anybody who went to the bathroom to defecate, so he would have to go to the mikveh, immerse himself entirely afterwards, whereas somebody who went to urinate, so then they would do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, they would just wash their hands and their feet. Says the Gemara, b'shlomer raglayim mishum nitzotzis. Says the Gemara, I understand why you'd have to wash your feet after urinating, because what if you're pishing and some drops splatter from the ground and get on your legs? So I understand why you'd want to wash your feet. Eliyodayim, my time, but how come you have to wash your hands? What's the big deal? Somer Abba, Zosomer is mitzvah l'shavshev. So says Rabbi Abba, well, from the fact that you have to wash your hands must mean that you're using your hands. It must mean that you have to, in case you got any of these drops on your legs, so you have to get rid of them with your hands. So therefore your hands also get affected, get dirty. So you wash your hands, you wash your feet, and then you get back to the avodah maseilah, the Rabbi Ami. So this supports Rabbi Ami. The Rabbi Ami also l'adam she'etzi b'nitzotzis shagah b'raglav. So it says Rabbi Ami that a person is not allowed to go out with drops of urine on his legs. Alright. Well, because what's going to happen? The yentis are going to be walking around town looking to see what kind of stuff they could dig up on people. They're going to say, Yankel's got a shtickle pish on his legs. It must be that he's a krosh shafcha. It must be that he's missing part of his penis, and that's why he's unable to pish properly, and the urine gets on his legs. And it must be, if that's the case, that he's a krosh shafcha, so then he's unable to have children. Krosh shafchas can't have children. So then they're going to say, but he has children. So then the yentis, they're going to say, wait, this doesn't add up. He's got pish on his legs. He must be a krosh shafcha, but he has children. Whose children are they? He can't have children. He's a krosh shafcha. So it must be that these children are mamzerim. That's what it must be. And because of these nudnik yentis, everybody now has to wash their hands after they go to the bathroom. Yentis. Alright. What can you do? It's part of life. So let's say that Reb Abba, so this Mishnah essentially, which says that you have to wash your hands because you don't want to have nitzotzis, this supports Reb Ami, who says that don't go out with nitzotzis because people might think that your children are mamzerim. Amar Papa says, Papa, Tzoibim Koma, also the Kos Kriyashma. Alright? So it says Rav Papa that if you have any excrement, if you didn't wipe yourself well after going to the bathroom, so then you can't read Kriyashma. Alright? Echidami. Well, tell us a little more. What do you mean you didn't wipe yourself well? Well, idiniris pshita. If you did such a bad job that the excrement is visible, well then obviously you can't read Kriyashma. Idiloniris, if it's not visible, well the Torah wasn't given to angels. Not everybody is going to do a perfect job. So the Gemara makes a chilik. So it says, well, it depends. If when you're sitting, it's visible, but when you stand up, it's no longer visible, So that is what we're talking about. And Rav Papa says that in that case you can't read Kriya Shema. Alright? Gemara says, wait, but 1 second. Why should this be any different than when you have excrement on your body, on your flesh? That it said it's absaro if you have excrement on your flesh. Or you're standing outside of the bathroom, but you stick a hand into the bathroom. Rav Huna Amar mutar likros Kriya Shema. Rav Huna says your mamash allowed to read Kriya Shema. Rav Chizda Amar also likros Kriya Shema. Rav Chizda says, okay, you're not allowed to read Kriya Shema, but that's only because it's mamish on your limbs, on your body, on your flesh. As Rashi points out, the pasuk says, Kol atzmosai tumarna Hashem, that all of my bones speak to God, and therefore you can't have excrement on your bones. But either way, whether you're Rav Huna who says it's mamish mutter, or Rav Chizda who says that it's dafka because of Kol atzmosai tumarna, that wouldn't necessarily be in line with Rav Papa, who seems to be saying it's not necessarily anywhere on your body, but specifically if you didn't clean yourself well. So then it has to do with apparently like the smell or something. So bimkoma nafesh zuama shlo bimkoma nafesh zuama. So well, if you don't clean yourself well, kilu, in the place where the excrement comes from, so the smell is stronger. And if you don't clean yourself well, so then that's a bigger deal than if it's I guess in a different part of, if it's just like on your arm or something like that. All right, very, very beautiful. So okay, so I think we managed to get through that piece. Let's go weiter. Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis taught halacha b'suda. So the halacha is when it comes to suda, adam yotze lahashtin mayim. I guess not entirely done. So if in the middle of a meal a fellow goes out to pish, nota yado achas v'nichnas. So he just needs to wash one of his hands, the hand that he used to clean off the drops from his leg, v'nichnas, and then he can go into the suda. So he goes to the bathroom, washes one of his hands, and then he goes into the suda. Dibrem chaveru. If he went to speak with his friend, v'hiflik, and he was out speaking, schmoozing for a long time, notel shtei yadav v'nichnas. So then he's got to wash both of his hands, because he had hesach hadas, he wasn't paying attention, he was talking to his friend, and maybe he touched a part of his body, or touched something that he shouldn't touch, that he would have to wash his hands for. So you wash your hands before getting back to your meal. And when he washes his hands before returning to the meal, he shouldn't wash his hands outside where nobody could see, because people might think that he didn't wash his hands before coming back. So rather what he does is he comes back into the suda and he sits at his place, and then they bring him water and he washes his hands in his place, and then he gives the jug, the pitcher that he's using for washing his hands, he passes it around the table to the rest of the guests to ask, does anybody else want to wash their hands, so that it will be clear that he washed his hands when he came back. Alright? Lo amaran ela lishtos. Says Rav Chizda that when we say that you have to dafka wash your hands inside so that everyone knows that you washed your hands, that's only if the meal's over and everyone's sitting around and drinking and enjoying themselves. Havalechol, but if he's coming back to the meal and they're still eating, well then notam b'chutz v'nichnas. You can wash your hands outside and then come in and rejoin the meal. Because everyone knows, like, if he's coming back to eat, he's certainly going to wash his hands in advance and beforehand, and they're not really concerned. It's only when the meal is over, and as Rashi points out, that they would generally sit around drinking after the meal. So if he came back at that part, maybe people would think that he didn't wash his hands before coming back. So that's why he washes his hands dafka inside and passes it around and makes the whole thing, so that people realize that he certainly washed his hands. But if they're eating, they'll assume that he just washed his hands before he came back. So it says of Nachman bar Yitzchak that when it comes to himself personally, even if the meal is over and everyone's sitting around drinking and he comes back for that part, he would not have to wash his hands inside, because everyone could assume that he washed his hands outside, since he's particular about washing his hands even before drinking. Alright. Very good. Let's go weiter. New Mishnah. In Adam Nichnas La'azar La'avoda Ela Ad Sheyitbo. So a person cannot go into the Azar in the Beis HaMikdash to go to do the service, a Kohen, to do the service in the Azar. Afilu Tahor, even if he's Tahor. Okay, maybe he went to the mikveh the day before. He's Tahor, he knows he's Tahor. But still, if you're going to the Azar to do Avoda, you go to the mikveh first. So again, Ein Adam Nichnas La'azar La'avoda El Afilu Tahor. So a person a Kohen Mistama doesn't go into the Azara to do the temple service, afilu tahor, even if he's pure, ad sheyitbo, until he goes to the mikveh first. Now on Yom Kippur, the Kohen Gadol would go to the mikveh 5 times, and he would wash his hands and his feet 10 times on Yom Kippur, v'chulim b'kodesh, and all of these mikvehs and kiddush yadayim v'raglayim were in the holy part of the Azara, al Beis HaParveh, on top of the Beis HaParveh that we learned about the other day. Chutz mizo bilvad, with the exception of this one alone, i.e. the first one, that was done on top of the Sha'ar HaMayim, which we also learned about the other day, which was not in the holy part of the Azara. Parsusadin bein shabutz bein levina'am, and then they spread out a sheet of cotton between him and the nation, and I believe we will get to that, to explain that in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, Shalos ben Zoma, they asked ben Zoma Tefillah Zolama. So they asked ben Zoma, how come, if you have a Kohen who's Tahor, how come he's got to go to the mikvah another time before he does the service? He's Tahor after all. Amr Loim, so ben Zoma responds, Uma mishanimi kodesh l'kodesh v'makom shanush karis l'makom shanush karis ta'un tevila. Hamishanimi chol l'kodesh v'makom she'en anush karis l'makom shanush karis enu din she'ta'un tevila. Let's read that again. Well, before we read it again, let's just explain it outside. So the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, so he goes to the mikvah between each of the 5 services that he does. Now, when he goes to on Yom Kippur, he's going from one holy place to another holy place. So he's going lefnai v'lefnim, and just lefnim, from the Heichal to the Kodesh HaKodashim, one holy place to another holy place. From one place where if you go in there when you're tameh, you're chayiv karis, to another place where if you go in there when you're tameh, you're chayiv karis. And nonetheless, and yet, he still has to go to the mikvah in between each time. Well, then certainly, a kohen who's showing up for the service in the temple, where he's coming from his house, a place that is not holy, and now he's coming to the Beis HaMikdash, a place where if he's tameh, he would not be chayiv karis, and now he's coming to the Beis HaMikdash where if he's tameh, he'd be chayiv karis, certainly he should have to go to the mikveh. So now let's read that inside. Amr Loim, he responded, Uma mishanim kodesh l'kodesh, the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, that he's going from one holy place to another holy place, umimakom shanush karis l'makom shanush karis, or from one place where if you go in there when you're tameh, you're chayiv karis, to another place where if you go in there when you're tameh, you're chayiv karis, ta'un tevila, and yet he goes to the mikvah between each one. Hamishanim chol kodesh, somebody, a Kohen, at the beginning of the day, who's coming from his house, a place that is unholy, not particularly holy, to a place that's holy, or from a place, right, and from a place that, if you go in there when you're tameh, you're not chayiv karis, your house, to a place where when you go there and you're tameh, you're taka chayiv karis, certainly then you should have to go to the mikvah when going from one to the other. And that is why a Kohen, at the beginning of a service in the temple, before going into the Azara, he goes to the mikvah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, Srach Tvila Hizo. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, it's really the purpose of this reminder, of this mikvah, is really as a reminder. It's not an obligation, it's not a chiyuv, but you have to do it, but what's the purpose? How come you go to the mikvah as a Kohen before you start the service in the morning in the Beis HaMikdash? As a reminder, what are we reminding you? That by going to the mikvah, why do you go to the mikvah? You go to the mikvah to purify yourself. Because somebody who's impure goes to the mikvah and he becomes pure. And we're saying that even if you're already pure, go to the mikvah anyways, because that process of purification will remind you and make you think, wait, am I actually pure? Maybe I am actually Tameh. And if he remembers, that he is actually Tameh, well then he will not work in the Beis HaMikdash that day because he'll use this mikvah as a tvila, and then he'll have, let's say he became Tameh from Sheretz or something, so he'll have to have Harav Shemesh, and he won't be able to work that day. And this and he wouldn't have realized, if he hadn't gone to the mikvah, he wouldn't have remembered that he was actually Tameh. So therefore, going to the mikvah just serves as a reminder for the kohen to reflect and to think, wait, am I actually tahor before I start doing the avodah? What exactly are they arguing about? They're arguing about what happens if a kohen does the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash without going to the mikvah. Is the service that he did in the Beis HaMikdash invalid, or is it okay if he didn't go to the mikvah beforehand? According to Ben Zoma, who says that you go to the mikvah before starting the service as from a kal vachomer from the Kohen Gadol, that if the Kohen Gadol has to go to the mikvah, well then kal vachomer, a regular Kohen, when he starts the service in the morning has to go to the mikvah. Well then if he doesn't go to the mikvah, and he didn't do something that he needs to do, well then any service that he did is invalid. According to Rabbi Yehuda, look, it's a reminder. There's a reason why I want you to go to the mikvah, so that you think, and in case you were already tameh, so you'll remember that. If you didn't do it, okay, you didn't, meaning you're supposed to do it and you didn't do it, but okay, fine. So you didn't have the reminder, mistam yutar anyways. So it's okay. But fact the Gemara, even according to Ben Zoma, if this Kohen skipped going to the mikvah before the service, would the service really be invalid? But we learn in the Brisa, Kohen Gadol shelo taval v'lo kidesh ben beged v'eged v'in avodah l'avodah. If you have the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur who did not go to the mikvah or did not do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim between changing between his clothing or between the different avodas that he was doing, avodasu ksher, his service in the temple on Yom Kippur is nonetheless kosher. So now let's finish the brisa. Echad kohen gadol v'echad kohen hedjed. Now, both a kohen gadol and a kohen hedjed in general, shel kiddush yadav v'raglav shachris, if they didn't do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim in the morning, v'avad, and then he did a service in the temple, avodah psula, says avodah is pasul. But okay, fine. Beseder. The second part, I guess, is just saying that you have to initially do kiddush yadayim v'raglayim. Fine. Now, the first part of the brisa said that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, if he skips going to the mikvah between one of the avodas or doing kiddush yadayim v'raglayim, we say that nonetheless the avodah is kosher. Now, Ben Zoma's whole premise, his whole svara, was based on the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, right? What was Ben Zoma's logic? How come a Kohen has to go to the mikvah before he does the avodah, even if he knows that he's tahor? Well, kal v'chomer. If a Kohen Gadol has to go to the mikvah during the avodah on Yom Kippur, and he's already in a place that's holy, and going to a place that's holy, and he's already in a place where you'd be chayiv kares if you're tameh, and he's going to another place where he's chayiv kares if he's tameh, and he still has to go to the mikvah, well then certainly a regular fellow who's coming, a regular Kohen who's coming from his house, a place where is not holy, where if he's there when he's tameh, he's not chayiv kares, certainly he'll have to go to the mikvah. Now, if Ben Zoma's svara is learned out, is based upon the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur, and we have a brisa that says that the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur himself, if he doesn't go to the mikvah, the avodah is nonetheless kosher, well then certainly a regular Kohen that we're learning out from Kohen Gadol, if he skips going to the mikvah, it will also be kosher. Could be b'di'evet, but it will be kosher. So we can't say that the difference between Rabbi Yehuda, who says that he goes to mikvah as a reminder, and Ben Zoma, who learns that as a kal v'chomer from the Kohen Gadol, we can't say that the difference is that Ben Zoma would say that if you skipped going to the mikvah, then the avodah is psula. Because Ben Zoma learns it out from the Kohen Gadol, and even that we have a brisa that says that even the Kohen Gadol himself, if he skips going to the mikvah, it would nonetheless be kosher. So rather says the Gemara, el mekam be'esek miflegei, that the machlokas is is it a mitzvah saseh to go to the mikveh? The Ben Zoma koi be'eseh, the Rabbi Yehuda lo koi be'eseh. So, according to Ben Zoma, it would be a mitzvah saseh, like an actual mitzvah to go to the mikveh, because we learned it out like from the Kohen Gadol, that he goes to the mikveh, and that's a mitzvah saseh. So also, any Kohen Hedjit going to the mikveh before the avoda in the Beis HaMikdash would be a mitzvah saseh. Rabbi Yehuda lo kai be'aseh. According to Rabbi Yehuda, it's not a mitzvah saseh, it's just a reminder. Fine. Frekte Gemara, u'mi'isle Rabbi Yehuda aisvare. Does Rabbi Yehuda really hold that a person who's tahor needs to go to the mikvah before going into the Azara? We learn in a brayso, mitzora tova va'omed b'shai nikinor. We have a brayso that says a mitzora on the 8th day. Kilu, he has leprosy. He's tahor for 7 days. On the 7th day, he goes to the mikvah. Then on the 8th day, he goes to the Beis HaMikdash and he gets like blood on his fingers and stuff. So we're talking about the 8th day. He had already gone to the mikveh the day before on the 7th day. Now it's the 8th day. Mitzorah tova va'omed b'shar nikinor. So he goes to the mikveh, right? There's the Lishkas HaMitzorayim. He goes to the Lishkas HaMitzorayim, and that's in the Lishkas, in the Ezras Noshim. And he goes to the mikveh, and then he heads over to Shar Nikinor on the eastern gate of the Azara, of the Ezra Gedola. Azara Gedola, I guess. And Zeo, and he does whatever he's there to do. So we see that the Mitzorah goes to the mikveh, and then he goes to the Shar Nikanor. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, however, Eino tzarich tvila, shekvar tovel, mi ba'erev. Says Rabbi Yehuda, actually you don't need to go to the mikveh. The Mitzorah does not need to go to the mikveh, because he already went to the mikveh the day before. So we see that according to Rabbi Yehuda, if a fellow knows that he's tahor, he doesn't have to go to the mikveh. So then why is he saying that the Kohen, before his service, he goes to the mikveh even if he knows that he's tahor? So the Gemara says, okay, so the Gemara says, well, in that brayso, Rabbi Yehuda was actually pretty explicit that the reason why the Mitzorah does not have to go to the mikveh on the 8th day is because he specifically went to the mikveh the day before, and therefore we kind of know that he's tahor. But I guess maybe in the case of the Kohen, it wasn't explicit that he dafka went to the mikveh the day before, so maybe he's just assuming that he's tahor, which maybe wouldn't be enough, and that's why he goes to the mikveh even according to Rabbi Yehuda. Fine. With the karila, my karila. So now, if we're saying that the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is explicit in the brayso, that it's because he went to the mikveh the day before, the Mitzorah went to the mikveh the day before, so what's the shaila? So because we have another kasha based on what Rabbi Yehuda says somewhere else. What does he say somewhere else? Lishkas HaMitzorayin. Okay, so in the Ezras Noshim, there was this office for the Mitzorahs, Shesham Mitzorayin Tovlin. That's where the Mitzorahs on day 8 they go to the mikveh before going to the Shar Nikanor. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo Mitzorayin b'vad amru el kol adam. And Rabbi Yehuda then says, actually, it wasn't just the Mitzorahs, but rather even everybody. If they have to go into the Azar, so then they go to the mikveh first. So what do we see? So we see that Rabbi Yehuda is saying not only do the Mitzorahs go to the mikveh, but also everybody else. So Rabbi Yehuda actually seems to be saying that the Mitzorahs do go to the mikveh. So which one is it? On the one hand, we had a brayso a second ago that where Rabbi Yehuda says that the Mitzorahs don't go to the mikveh because they went to the mikveh the day before. And then we have this brayso which says that the Mitzorahs do go to the mikveh, and not only them, but even everybody. The Gemara says, lo kasha, it's no problem. How come? Hadatavil adulotavil. Depends if he went to the mikvah on day 7. If he went to the mikvah on day 7, so then he doesn't have to go to the mikvah on day 8 according to Rabbi Yehuda. If he didn't go to the mikvah on day 7, so he goes to the mikvah on day 8 before going to Shar Nikanor. Idilotavil, Ayav Shemesh, boy. But Frekti Gemara, it doesn't just work like that. That if you didn't go to the mikvah on day 7, so then just on day 8, Chaparain, go to the mikvah in the Lishkas HaMitzorayin and then head over to the Shar Nikanor. You need Ayav Shemesh. You need to go to the mikvah and then be a Tvul Yom for the rest of the day, and then it comes nighttime, and then you become tahor, and then the next day you'll go to the mikvah and and go to Shar Nikanor. So you can't just say that Rabbi Yehuda would say that if he didn't go to the mikvah on day 7, so then on day 8 he just goes to the mikvah quickly and goes to Shar Nikanor. He would have to have Hayav Shemesh before he could head over to Shar Nikanor. Okay, so it must be that in both cases, in both braysos, Rabbi Yehuda is talking about where he already went to the mikvah. On day 7, it just depends if he sort of lost his guard, if he let down his guard, if he wasn't paying attention to make sure that he remained tahor. So as long as he did have intention and he was careful to make sure he remains tahor, so in the next day, Rabbi Yehuda would say he does not have to go to the mikveh, he can just go straight to Shar Nikanor. Whereas, if he kind of wasn't necessarily on high alert and he wasn't paying attention, so then just go to the mikveh on day 8 a second time before going to Shar Nikanor. But if a person wasn't paying attention to make sure that he remains tahor, well then we have to be concerned that maybe he went into an oil ames. And if that's the case, then right, if he had hesach hadas, and now we're not sure if maybe he went into an oil ames, so he needs to have hazah shlishi v'shvi. You have to sprinkle the mechatos on him on day 3 and day 7. So it can't be that Rabbi Yehuda is saying that if he went to the mikvah on day 7 and then he had hesach hadas and now it's day 8, he just goes to the mikvah and then he can head over to Shar Nikanor. If he had hesach hadas, he would have to have mamish purification on day 3 and day 7, like a whole week worth of purification, not just quickly jumping in the mikvah. To Amar Reb Dostai, as Reb Dostai said, by Matun, Amar Reb Yochanan, hesach hadas tzarich hazah shlishi v'shvi, that a fellow who has hesach hadas, so he's got to have sprinkling on day 3 and day 7. Ela'idi v'idi d'lo hesach daite. So rather, in both cases of Rabbi Yehuda, there was no hesach hadas. So we have a mitzorah. He went to the mikvah on day 7. It's now day 8. He knows that he's tahor. There was no hesach hadas. It depends what his intention was when he went to the mikvah on day 7. If when he went to the mikvah on day 7, he had in mind that he was going to be that he was going to be coming to the Beis Hamikdash the next day to go to Shar Nikanor and get the blood put on his fingers. So if he had intention on day 7 that he was going to be going to the Beis Hamikdash the next day, so then he doesn't have to go to the mikvah a second time on day 8. But if he didn't have intention on day 7 that he was going to be heading to the Beis Hamikdash the next day, so then he goes to the mikvah again on day 8 before going to Shar Nikanor. V'bai Seymour, if you want to give you a different reason, Tani lo mitzorah namu ela kol adam. Or else if you want, I will say that the second brisa doesn't say that not only do mitzorahs go to the mikvah according to Rabbi Yehuda, but even everybody else. Don't say that. Rather say, no, the mitzorahs do not go to the mikvah according to Rabbi Yehuda. Everybody else goes to the mikvah. And therefore, if you say it like that, so then Rabbi Yehuda is consistent in saying that mitzorahs do not have to go to the mikvah on day 8. Ravina Amar says, Ravina Rabbi Yehuda, the Devarim D'Rabbanan Kamarlu. Ravina says that when Rabbi Yehuda says that not only do mitzorahs go to the mikvah, but also everybody else, he's not saying that his opinion is that mitzorahs go to the mikvah, because, says Ravina, Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is that mitzorahs do not go to the mikvah. They already went to the mikvah on day 7. What he's saying is that according to the rabbis, that the rabbis say that on day 8, the mitzorahs go to the mikvah in the Lishkas HaMitzorayim before heading over to the Shar Nikanor. Rabbi Yehuda then responds to the rabbis and he says, L'didi mitzorah ein tzarich tefillah. That look, I hold that mitzorahs don't have to go to the mikvah because on day 8, because they already went to the mikvah on day 7. However, l'didchu, but according to you, that you say that mitzorahs do have to go to the mikvah, odu li izi mias, do admit to me, d'lo mitzorah b'vad amru, that it wouldn't just be mitzorahs, ela kol adam, but that everybody also would have to go to the mikvah before going to the Hazar. V'Rabbanan mitzorah dayish b'tuma kol adam lo dayish b'tuma, but the rabbis would argue no, mitzorah davka has to go to the mikvah even if he thinks that he's tahor, because mitzorahs are accustomed to being tameh. Like mitzorah is like a long freaking thing. Like you get saras, you got to go out of the camp, and like you're tameh. Then once you're no longer seeing tsaras, you then have a whole nother week of being tahor. And only after that do you go to the Beis HaMikdash. So like for the last few weeks, he's like in like tameh mode, in mitzorah mode, and therefore, because he's like so used to being in tameh mode, so then, or who knows, maybe he's even mitzorah for more than just a few weeks. I don't know how long people are mitzorahs for. So, it could be that they're not used to being in tahor mode, and that's why they have to go to the mikvah. Whereas the rabbis would say, somebody who wasn't with Torah, wasn't, if he thinks that if he assumes that if he thinks that he's tahor, we can assume that he's tahor. He wouldn't necessarily have to go to the mikveh. Amalei Abaye of Yosef. Abaye says to Yosef, Nemer Rabbana de Pligi Ale de Reb Yehuda. Let's say that the rabbis in the initial brisa, where Rabbi Yehuda says, right, the rabbis say that a Mitzorah goes to the mikveh before going to Shar Nikanor. And Rabbi Yehuda says that he doesn't because he already went to the day before. So let's say, Kiven Zoma Svirlu. Let's say that the rabbis hold like Ben Zoma. That going to the mikveh before going into the Azara is Mamash Mitzvah Saseh, it's a Chiyuv. And the reason why they mention specifically a Mitzorah, is to teach the extreme position of Rabbi Yehuda, that he says that even a Mitzorah who is Tameh does not have to go to the mikveh because he went to the mikveh the day before. Or Dilma, or perhaps Shiny Mitzorah, Dedayish Betuma. Or maybe the rabbis would say, no, specifically a Mitzorah has to go to the mikveh before going to Shar Nikanor, but everybody else, right, because Mitzorah is like so used to being Tameh all the time. O Dilma, or perhaps says Abai, oh wait, where am I? Okay, fine, Dedayish Betuma. So Amalei Shiny Mitzorah Dedayish Betuma, to which Rabbi Yosef responds, yeah, that's exactly it. That Mitzorahs specifically have to go to the mikveh because they are so used to being in a tamei space. Therefore, they mamish have to go to the mikveh before, on day 8, before the behonot. Whereas, I guess regular people who aren't, accustomed to being tamei, so if they're tahor, they don't necessarily have to go to the mikveh before going to the Shar Nikanor. Interesting. How does that tie in with our Mishnah that says that everybody has to go to the Ein Adam Nichnas Azar? Maybe that's specifically Kohanim for Avoda, or maybe that's particularly the opinion of Ben Zoma. Or maybe it wouldn't necessarily be a Chiyuv. I don't know. It's interesting. Different opinions here. Alright, well, that was Daf Lamed of Masechta Yoma. So the first part of the Daf kind of was like a deep dive into like the bathroom sugyas that we remember from Masechta Brachos. And then we got to a new Mishnah which discusses Kohanim going to the mikveh before their avodah. We saw the machlokas between Ben Zoma and Rabbi Yehuda. Ben Zoma says that it's a chiyuv, that a Kohen must go to the mikveh before doing the avodah. And he learns that out from a Kavachomer from the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda says, look, sure, he's got to go to the mikveh, but it's really just a reminder, just in case for him to remember, and to think, make sure that he's not actually tamei. We then discussed a Mitzorah on the 8th day of his purification process. According to the Chachamim, even though he went to the mikvah on day 7, still on day 8 he goes to the mikvah again before going to Shar Nikanor to get blood put on his hands and fingers and toes. And according to Rabbi Yehuda, he doesn't necessarily have to go to the mikvah because he already went to the mikvah the day before. Now we have a different brisa though that seems to be implying that Mitzoras do go to the mikvah. So we gave 2 answers. One answer was that if he went to the mikvah on day 7 with the intention that he was going to be going to the Beis HaMikdash the next day, so then he doesn't have to go to the mikvah again. Whereas if he went to the mikvah on day 7 without that intention, so then he would have to go to the mikvah on day 8. And the other way to understand it is that actually in the second brisa, what Rabbi Yehuda is saying is that actually Mitzoras don't have to go to the mikvah, consistent with the first brisa, and meaning on day 8, only other people would have to go to the mikvah on day 8. Alright, well, that was Daf Lamed. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.